Jack saying, I believe that God does intervene in people's lives. I'm going to try to get through all the calls today. I'm going to try to do that. So, Jack, give us what you got.
Hey, just first off the bat, it's Scott and Armin. Do I have those names correct?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, you are correct.
Yes. There's a delay. Go on.
Yeah. Sorry, I just did not hear you. Yeah. So I do believe that God intervenes in people's lives. I could say a lot about this. I guess the thing I would say first and foremost is I've seen it in my own life. And I've known a lot of other people who've seen it in theirs. That's probably the biggest thing that convinces me personally is my own.
How do you know it was God?
How
do you know what you saw was God?
Yeah, I mean that's a fair question. Well, to answer your question first, I suppose. I guess I would just say that I don't see God as any inherently less of an explanation as anything else. And considering that I know I and people in my life have prayed for outcomes and had outcomes like that, if I'm being honest, that's probably the biggest thing that convinces me is just, the fact that I know people were praying for it. And, obviously that doesn't prove that they were connected, but it is at least evidence, like if we were doing statistical data.
Sorry to interrupt here. People were praying for what? To experience God?
There's, intervene in people's lives was the question. So I was kind of thinking more like stuff like health outcomes. Like as a recent example, to be, and this probably isn't the best example throughout my entire life, but it's the most recent one is I have a buddy of mine, who had a heart condition, about a year back, where he was having, just locking up basically and, not being able to work and, having instances where he kind of blacked out. And, I prayed for him, and as funny as it might sound to some, and I'm sure it will sound funny to some people in the chat, he got shocked accidentally, in an electrical accident after that, and the problem kind of took care of itself, at least as far as the doctors say. And that doesn't prove anything, obviously. I'm not trying to say it proves anything, but it's just one of the many examples I've had.
So if it doesn't,
know that it was God?
If it doesn't, yeah. How do you know it was God?
Oh, no, that's fair. I mean, I don't know it was God, but the thing is, I feel like there's a lot of things where I accept a relation that I don't know. You know what I mean? Like,
so why do you accept it? Why do you accept it? So it does. You are. So Jack, I appreciate you being very honest, right? And you also understand the limitations of what you could conclude from the observation that you had. So that's pretty good. So given that what you are seeing does not like you prayed, something happened, and what you saw does not necessarily show that your belief is true here. That's what you're accepting that. Then why do you believe that? Do you believe that because it just feels right to believe it? Like, do you like believing it? Or do you have any other reasons for believing that this was because of your prayer or was because of God?
Give us the evidence that does support your conclusion.
If you care about evidence, maybe you don't care about evidence. Maybe are you choosing your? So, Jack, before maybe I'm assuming something, right? Because sometimes us atheists are guilty of just assuming that people want their beliefs to match reality. Sometimes many people don't care about that. Sometimes people want their beliefs to be the thing that gives them the feelings that they want their beliefs to give them. Do you want your belief to match reality, or do you want to choose your beliefs based on what feels right?
No, I believe in objective truth. I believe in material reality.
And do you want your belief to, and so you believe in objective reality, and do you want your belief to be close to objective reality as much as possible, or do you not care about that?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable thing to want. Yes, I do want that.
Okay. So given that you want that, you have the belief that some of your prayers have been answered by God, and you gave us some observation, and you're also admitting that observation itself does not show that your prayers have been answered by God. So what methodology have you used to identify whether or not this belief is close to objective reality or not?
Well, I guess I would just say that I think there's a distinction between proof and evidence. I'm an econ major. I went to college and got an econ degree, and I learned about statistics in it. And, when you're like looking at any two factors, say, the amount of time, the amount of carbon we're burning in the atmosphere and the temperature of the planet or something like that. If you have a hot year, that year unto itself doesn't prove global warming. It's, data taken over a set of time, the relation between two factors.
We understand the difference between proof and evidence, okay? We completely understand the difference between proof and evidence. So do you want to go the proof do the evidence route? Do you have proof for God that basically shows, or evidence for God? So if you have proof for God, that will make God certain to be real. If you have evidence for God, that will make that his existence likely to be true. So which one do you have? Like which, in your own mind, in Jack's mind, in Jack's reality, okay, you went with the belief in God and the belief that he answers prayers based on the evidence route or the proof route?
I would say I have evidence sufficient to believe, so I would say evidence.
Okay, give us.
Oh yeah,
that's great. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you say tell us? Did you say tell us?
Yeah. Give us evidence. We're on the edge of our seats. We have been waiting for this, Jack. We have been waiting for you for more than a decade now. We have been waiting for this very moment. So if you have evidence, me and Scott are very eager to hear what this evidence is. So go on.
Well, one piece of evidence that at least is something that can be checked that's outside of my own personal experience is are you guys familiar, either of you? I mean, I know you've probably both been doing this for a long time. Are you familiar with the case of the Vitroli Michelli, the guy from Lourdes, the Italian from Lourdes?
Doesn't ring a bell. I might have heard it, but the name is not making a connection there. Can you give us a quick rundown on that?
The evidence.
Yeah, so the Vitroli Michelli is one of the 9 examples that in the modern age, in recorded scientific history, since we've had the ability to detect this stuff, that there's been spontaneous remission of a bone tumor.
Okay.
And he had this happen after he went to Lourdes to, receive a blessing and bathe in the water and that sort of thing. And again, I'm not trying to say this is proof that, Vertorelli, received this healing from God. But just when you're talking about something as rare as that, a factor like
what
going
happened?
towards and getting healing that way.
I completely lost what happened. Scott, can you explain to me what just happened? I don't know what just happened.
Sure. So there was a guy, he had a bone tumor, then it went away after praying, I assume, or something, or is that, and you're saying that that's Lourdes. Evidence for God?
He went to Lourdes, France. Are you familiar with the shrine, the Catholic shrine in Lourdes, where the Virgin Mary is said to appear?
Okay. Jack, I thought we already established at the beginning of the call that that's not evidence. You admitted this, like observing something like this. I mean, many people have these experiences without praying or going to a shrine. Like people sometimes get better without us knowing why.
I mean, well, yeah, but I mean, usually those medical things are much more common. Only 9 people in human history have ever had a bone tumor spontaneously go into remission.
Yeah, there are many rare things that happens in medicine. There are rare things that happen. Some of them we can explain. Some of them we don't. Some of them happen when somebody was doing something religious, and sometimes they happen without somebody doing anything religious at all. We have had. My father is a heart surgeon. Okay, he had experienced many times people getting better without any with no prayers involved. And they were confused about how they got better. It's known to happen. It's something the medical field has not been able to explain everything. Sometimes people get better and doctors can't understand why. This is a known thing. And sometimes they coincide with you praying or going to a shrine. But sometimes it coincides with you not praying or not going to any shrine. How is this evidence at all? This is very, very weak evidence. I mean, it's not evidence at all. Do you have anything better?
Well, I mean, I would consider it to be evidence just on the fact that it's, comparing one factor to a result.
Why? Why do you think that's evidence?
Do you agree that sometimes these things happen without praying? Jack, do you know that sometimes people get better without the doctor's understanding how they got better, and it has without any prayer involved? Do you know that happens?
I'm aware that happens, yes.
Okay, so how is what you're telling us evidence?
Because this is not just people getting better from the flu or cold or anything. There's a very, very, very slim amount of people in human history who have ever had bone tumors spontaneously remiss. It's actually unique among cancer. Most cancer tumors generally have a much higher rate of spontaneous remission than bone cancers, specifically because of how long-standing they are.
Jack, you are saying unique. Unique means unique and impossible are different. Do you know what the word unique means? Unique means it happens. It's just rare. Unique means it's something that happens. It doesn't mean it's impossible.
That's why I said it was evidence, not proof. That's why I considered it to be evidence, not proof, because it's not like but
it's not even evidence at all. For it to be evidence, you actually have to show a connection. You cannot just show something that is happening and then assume the connection. You have to demonstrate the connection.
Well, the whole point is that a religious miracle is going to be independent of scientific, relation. Like I'm just using it as a statistical model.
Two things happening at the same time doesn't mean just two things happen at the same time does not create a causal relation. If you are looking for that's not how science works.
No. Oh, you're right. It demonstrates oh God, what's the other thing called? There's causality, and then there's
correlation.
Correlation. Not even.
Yes.
It doesn't even do correlation because you're not. It's not even doing correlation because for you to establish correlation, you need like a much larger sample size than one story.
This has only happened 9 times. Like this is over 10% of all cases definitionally.
9 times means that you don't have 9 times means that you don't have a big enough sample size for us to show us a correlation relationship. So you're not only you can't show causation, you don't even have a big enough sample size to do a correlation. And even if you wanted to do correlation, you have to look at other factors. You have to look at third, external factor that could be causing the correlation. Have you been able to create an environment where you could factor in other causes and exclude them for possibly having an effect? What if you're using these stories to establish correlation and then assume causation? Are you not noticing that maybe they have other shared similarities beyond the prayer? Then maybe it was that. If you're just going to go by correlation, you're pre-selecting the prayer part because you're biased towards God. What if I find other characteristics between them that were also similar? Would I be free to assume that is the cause?
Well, I'm trying to demonstrate the legitimacy of one explanatory factor. When scientists want to explain climate change by looking at it relative to carbon output, what they do is look at carbon output correlated to the temperature of the planet, and then thereby attempt to create a correlation.
They do it. Let's use that example. Do you think they use a sample size of 9? Do you think that they don't try to rerun their results with other scientists from all around the world to see if the results are repeatable?
Well, sure.
Are you able of doing that with this is not even remotely like when you're the example that you're giving us actually demonstrates how far away you are from actual evidence. You're talking about scientists globally from different corners of the world trying to reproduce the results and with large sample size, carefully collecting data, considering all external factors that they need to isolate for, and repeating the results and seeing without being connected to each other and seeing if they could reproduce them. And that's the standard that we have for evidence. You think what you provided us comes even remotely close to that?
Well, if there were more than 9 cases of spontaneous remission of bone cancer to look at, we would have stronger data. I don't deny that. I guess I would ask a question just real quick on the subject of, low sample size. Like, say there was one guy whose head got cut off and a priest prayed over him and his head, regrew spontaneously. Mm-hmm. And, like the Lord's example, we had scientific evidence, we had scientific review of this, we had scientists checking to make sure this has really happened, all that lovely stuff. This is a once-in-a-lifetime miracle. But because of that, there's only a sample size of 1. Would you say that a man having his head grow back in that instance, because of the lack of sample size, would not be evidence of God?
I would say it's not. I would say it's not. Yeah. And let me ask you this. Why would you say that it would be? Okay. First of all, you said that there was only 9 cases of this. Kelly's been chomping at the bit here as our backup host, saying he looked up and the American Cancer Society said bone cancer remission is actually quite common. But let's set that aside for a second. Let's assume that this is a unique thing. It's only happened once ever. And it's something ridiculously extreme, like somebody got their head cut off and then it was reattached. And so let's assume that this is the only time this has ever happened. Okay. Why do you think that's evidence that a God exists?
Well, because at least it's one data point.
That doesn't answer my question. It's correlation. We know it's one data point. It's one data point that shows what?
It shows at least a very small amount of evidence.
Evidence of in what way? I'm not asking you to name what we're talking about here. I'm asking you, why do you think one person getting their head chopped off and then reattached, why do you think that is evidence for a God?
Well, because it favors the one explanation. Like you could say this about anything else, right? Like,
okay, does it favor that? Why does it favor that explanation? That's what I'm asking for. Why do you think that it favors that explanation?
Because in the example I gave, the guy prayed over him, and that's one of the factors which you would look into any statistical analysis of the case example.
So he prayed over him, and so, but that you still haven't explained to me why this event implies the existence of a God. Let me reframe that a little bit. Why do you, because if God didn't exist, then God could not have done that, right?
Yes, I think that's a fair assumption.
Okay. So if there was no God, then it couldn't have been God that fixed the head or the cancer or whatever it is we're talking about. So you're suggesting that it could have been God. Are you overstating your position here? Are you assuming that there is a God? Because you just agreed that if there was no God, then you're not allowed to say it could have been God.
Yeah, I'm just assuming God's possible, a possible example.
Okay, there's your assumption. You're assuming God is possible, even though you just agreed that your assumption assumes God exists. Because if God did not exist, then it would not be possible that God did that. Is that right? Do you get what I'm saying?
Well, no. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but it's like you could say that anyone trying to demonstrate climate change by this logic was assuming climate change existed. That's not the case. They're just assuming climate change could exist. Fossil fuels could be the cause. That's how you demonstrate it through data. And I'm just giving one data.
No, that's not why they don't do it that way they don't do it with the assumption at the beginning, right? They test things. They know that certain chemicals mixed in certain ways with the atmosphere affect things, will trap heat and so forth. They can demonstrate that kind of thing. They're not assuming it. You have not demonstrated that a God exists in the same way that they've demonstrated that the mechanisms of global warming exist. Okay, we know that those mechanisms are there. We know that they happen, and we know how they occur. You don't have that when we're talking about God. You have supposition. And so I don't think that you can call something that's built on top of supposition evidence that the supposition is true.
To be clear, I would never claim I have as much evidence for God as there exists for climate change.
We're talking about anything. But I would say
No. Jack, you don't have any evidence. Also, by the way, so Kelly mentioned, as Scott said, according to American Cancer Society, bone cancer remission is common. And Jack, what do you? Somebody in the super chat also asked, What happened to the other 8 tumors that you claimed that they were healed? Were they also happening in shrines? All 9 of them happened in shrines?
They were not. They were at least not happening in Catholic shrines. No, I will admit that. As to the question about the thing your co-host came up with.
Okay, so the correlation assumption is not even correct. Like I assume that you're saying it happened only 9 times and every single one of them happened in a shrine. Even that would not be evidence. So you don't even have that. Wait, so you actually have 8 other examples of it just showing that, demonstrating that this is a rare thing, but that sometimes happens. So if this happened to somebody without them praying or being in a shrine, if it could happen without prayer or shrine, or with prayer or shrine, then the prayer or shrine is not required. So that actually shows that it's not it's not the shrine that is doing the thing.
Well, I would like to sincerely apologize if I gave the impression that I believed that all 8 of these had happened in Catholic shrines. That's not what I meant. I just meant that one of them had, and because of how
but some of them didn't.
Statistically common.
Agree.
Okay. But this is kind of a separate
okay,
point.
So, okay, but if what you're saying proves God, then it also proves no God, right? Because because I could go to another example that something very rare happened without any prayer or any shrine. I should be like, oh, well, therefore this shows that rare things happens without any God involvement. So that actually is a case for me. Like, why is this working in your favor? This should be your data. If it was evidence, it would actually be evidence for me, not evidence for you. I don't think it's evidence, but if it was, it just shows that the God is not required in this equation.
Yeah, I was just trying to give an example of something that is, unlikely that God did. Again, I didn't claim it was a miracle, because a miracle is something that never happens before.
I understand what you're saying. Something unlikely happened. It happened in a shrine, so you're trying to connect them. But if that was the correct thing to do, then when it happens without God, without shrine, without prayer, then you should be able to connect them as well. Like, why are you only connecting these events together when there's a shrine or prayer involved? Why are you not connecting the lack of prayer and the lack of shrine when these events, the rare events that happen, but sometimes they happen without any prayer? So why are you not connecting the lack of any God activity with that event, when these rare events happen? You should connect them as well, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think any scientist would be happy to look into the, all 9 cases of when we had bone tumors.
If I say the devil is Lord, right? And hail Satan, right? And then immediately after I win the lottery, will you then become a devil worshiper, Jack?
No, but I would say that's evidence. Let me say, if you said that before you won the lottery, I would say that's evidence, at least, that the devil gave you the lottery ticket. I wouldn't say it's proof, but I would admit it's evidence. I think there's evidence for a lot of claims.
What if I said my giant farting turtle? What if I pray to a giant farting turtle, and then I win the lottery? Will you then get on your knees and pray to my turtle?
No, I wouldn't, but I would admit there was evidence for your giant farting turtle.
It's not. Okay. It's not evidence for the giant farting turtle, because you haven't shown that the giant farting turtle is even possible in the first place. If you can't show that it's possible that a God did this, if you can't show that it's possible before you present this evidence, that it's already possible for a God to heal somebody of bone cancer, if you can't show that ahead of time, then this is not a possibility when you're coming into this evidence, and you cannot then come to that conclusion based off of this evidence. You need to know going into it that it's possible that God could be the cause. If you don't know that already, then you can't say, well, it could have been God, because then you're making an assumption there.
Well,
do you see that?
But Scott, if we went off that model, how would we ever prove like any novel concept, like atoms, for instance? Like if we had to know
proof or evidence,
atoms were possible.
You said proof or evidence, Jack. You said You said you know the difference between proof and evidence. Evidence. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
okay,
but
so maybe
about demonstrating.
Are you saying that it's possible that other people are making the same mistake as you?
Well, I'm saying that if I'm making a mistake, it's part of the process that leads to all scientific discovery. We need to hypothesize before we can demonstrate a concept.
Because in science we have a much higher standard for what we consider evidence. You cannot. What you're doing is not what science does. It's not at all. This is not even remotely close. You're labeling things as evidence that within science, they don't refer to it as evidence. They have a much, much higher standard for what is accepted as evidence in science.
So my understanding is that scientific evidence is evidence which is testable, repeatable, and reviewable. Would you guys agree that that is the definition of scientific evidence?
That has explanatory power, that has, okay, so sure. But I mean, there are some other standards as well, but even just what you mentioned, do you have that? Because if you with prayer, because people have been trying to conduct tests that shows that prayer has an effect on anything, and it has backfired. Like it actually has shown. It has actually shown that sometimes it has the reverse effect. So there is no, because if this is repeatable, if it's demonstratable, if it's like testable, then it would have been discovered by now. Like this would be a known thing within science that prayers heal. But anytime we did this, anytime there was a controlled, like we had blind tested, we had a control group, anytime we did the proper scientific methods were applied to study the effects of prayers. Every time we did this, it showed that it either doesn't have an effect or it has the opposite effect. And people sometimes guess that maybe the opposite effect might be because people are getting nervous. Why the fuck so many people are praying for me? I didn't know this. I didn't know this is so serious, and makes them nervous and makes them sick. But yeah, we have done this. We have tried to see if it's repeatable. And the conclusions were not in your favor, Jack.
If I just could just interject one thing in here, please. Jack, you said that God, it's not possible that God could cause this event to happen unless he exists. And then on the other hand, you said it's possible that God caused this event to happen. Those two things either clash or you're making an assumption. You said you agreed with both of those things. Do you still agree with both of those statements? You said God could be the thing that healed this man, and you also said that God could not have been possibly even the cause if it doesn't exist. Do you still agree with those two things? Because that's where your conflict is. That's where your contradiction is. You're making an assumption in order to present it as a possible solution, and then lo and behold, the solution supports the assumption that you made. Go figure.
Okay. I'm trying to understand what you're saying there, man.
Sure.
So because I assume God is possible, that contradicts with my statement that if God wasn't real, he couldn't have caused it. That's a contradiction in your mind?
The contradiction comes in, you have to assume that you said that God couldn't possibly have caused this event if he didn't exist. And then in the next sentence, you said God possibly caused this event, even though you just admitted that you're only allowed to say it could possibly be God if God exists, because if God doesn't exist, he can't heal anybody.
Yeah, that's why I said God could possibly exist. I treat him as I would any other possible explanation as something which is hypothetically possible.
Right, but you said more than just God could possibly exist. You said God could possibly have healed this man. Yeah, because a thing which exists definitionally interacts with the material world. That doesn't seem like an unreasonable assumption. And a thing that doesn't exist
and everything that
could not have been the cause.
True, and everything that may exist may interact with the material world.
No, it can't. Anything that may exist, we don't know if it can interact with the material world or not. It can. If it does exist, then maybe it could have been the healing. But if it didn't exist, then it couldn't have been. So when you said God may have healed this man, you were assuming God exists because by your own admission, your own agreement, if God doesn't exist, then he could not have been possibly the cause of the healing.
Yeah, Scott, like I was trying to ask earlier, how would you go about demonstrating a novel claim by your framework? Because it seems to me that it's like, something has to be demonstrated to exist before it can be demonstrated to exist.
So if you want to demonstrate something exists, you should not use an indirect argument like this, because these indirect arguments require for the God to exist to even start. So if you want to show that something exists, then you should take a direct approach. You should say, here, this mug exists. If the mug might not exist, then we can't be talking about things that the mug might have done if the mug doesn't exist. And so what I'm saying is that this type of argument is flawed in that it can't address unique or unusual thing. Something that isn't already demonstrated to exist can't be presented as a possible cause of something else.
Let me answer Jack's question. Jack, the way I would, if I was a scientist, the way I would go about answering a question, like, this is a novel claim. You say, how will we go about demonstrating it? Well, I require a sample group, a group that is my control group, right? And then I would require, let's say, for example, 500 people with bone tumors. Is that what you said, right? That nobody prays for. And then another 500 people that they have bone tumor, that we will take into shrines and pray for them in the shrines. Another 500 people that have bone tumors, that we will pray for them, but without taking them to shrines, right? Another 500 people that we will take into shrines and we won't pray for them. And then I need the 500 other people that have bone tumors, and we will just say positive things to them without praying, tell them that they're going to be okay, give them good vibes, give them good feelings, just support them, tell them everything is going to be good. So I just want to see that if the prayer is doing any work, maybe it's not because of any supernatural things. Maybe it's just like people talking to you and being around you. So I need a whole bunch of different categories for me to be able to compare these things with each other, right? So I could go tell you what other, maybe 500 is too much, but this is too expensive of a study. Maybe 150 in each category would be enough, right? I don't know. We have to. My team needs to analyze how many numbers we need for each category. We need a control. The most important one is that we need a control group, right? And then we would observe them throughout the recovery and see what happens. There needs to be varied enough for these people to have. I need to control for all other external factors. Like one group might have a certain doctor that is higher quality than the other group. So then these are not random enough. So I need to make sure that my team and I are coming up with all ways to see if we could control for all other external variables that is affecting my samples, right? And then after all of the study, I will publish my results. It has to go through peer review. And even after that is not good enough. The results will sit there, and then we will wait to see if somebody else, somewhere else in the world, could now replicate my results, and then somebody else to replicate both of us. And then maybe at some point we will have enough studies that we could do a meta-study, a meta-analysis on all our studies, and that's how we will be able to test a novel claim. That's how we do it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think that's I understand where you're coming from. I wanted to respond to something Scott said, but I guess we kind of moved on from that, so I won't drag us back to earlier in the conversation. Anyway, I understand your model, Armin, for evaluating novel claims. There's more I could say about what my own feelings are, but I guess at a certain point it's just preference. So if you guys want to leave it there, we can. That's
how we have all the things we have today. I mean, it seems to be doing wonders. Like with this model, we have managed to, I don't know, have phones and planes and computers. It seems to be doing fine. Like this seems to be the way, right? Because you shall know them by the fruits of their labor.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with scientific evidence, obviously. I guess I'm not entirely sure it's sufficient for, dealing with novel phenomena or phenomena we don't know much about. I could speak more on it if you guys are interested, but if you want, you can just end the call or whatever.
No, call us back, Jack. Yeah. You're very fun to talk to. You're pretty honest with your limitations, and you're a clear speaker, which I cannot say that about our previous callers, so we understand what you're saying. And you're very patient with us.
Yes.
So we appreciate you. So thank you so much
Jack.
for calling, and I hope you call again.
Thank you, Jack. I really appreciated this call. It was very, very interesting.